The sun hung low over the desert horizon, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and dusty rose. The year was 1875, and the small town of Bitter Creek sat on the edge of nowhere. A handful of weathered buildings leaned against the emptiness, like old men too tired to stand. The Apache Wars had quieted to an uneasy peace, but fear still lingered in the air like smoke from old fires. Hatred ran deep here, deeper than the dry wells that barely kept the town alive. Clara Morgan stood at the window of her father's inn, watching dust devils spin down the empty street. At 20, she possessed a quiet beauty that seemed misplaced in this harsh land. Her soft brown hair was pinned neatly beneath a simple bonnet, and her hazel eyes held more dreams than the desert held stars. Her hands, roughened by work, still moved with a grace that spoke of gentler beginnings back east before her family had chased fortune to this forgotten place. "Clara, stop your daydreaming and fetch water from the creek," her mother called from the kitchen, her voice sharp from years of exhaustion. "We've got guests arriving on the evening stage." "Yes, Mama." Clara set down the cloth she'd been using to clean the window. The desert rose in. Her father's proud attempt at bringing civility to the frontier demanded endless work: water for cooking, water for washing, water for the horses. Always water, precious as gold in a land where rain was a stranger and the creek ran thin by summer's end. She took the wooden yoke and 2 empty buckets and stepped out into the fading light. The town was quiet, except for the hammering at the blacksmith's forge and the murmur of old men outside the general store. Clara nodded to Mrs. Henderson sweeping her porch and ignored the lingering gaze of Tom Bradley, who leaned against the saloon rail with a grin too lazy to trust. Past the last building, the road narrowed to a trail that wound through scattered mesquite and sage. The air smelled sharp and dry. She had walked this path 1,000 times, knew every stone and thorn, yet today something felt different. Perhaps it was the way the light slanted through the cottonwoods near the creek, or how the usual birdsong had fallen silent. The creek ran shallow but clear. Clara knelt on the flat rocks where she always drew water and dipped her bucket. The coolness of it against her skin felt like grace. She was reaching for the second bucket when she heard it. A soft sound, the quiet nickering of a horse. Close, too close. Her body froze. Travelers used the main road, not this hidden trail known only to locals. Her heart raced. Could it be Indians? But no. Indians moved silent as smoke. This was different. Slowly, Clara rose, her hand moving to the small knife at her belt. Through the willows, she saw movement. A horse, a dusty bay gelding drinking from the stream. And beside it, a man. He knelt by the water's edge, hat set aside, cupping water to his face. Even at a distance, she saw the road-worn state of him. Dark trousers tucked into scuffed boots, a faded gray shirt, a leather vest cracked with age and sun. When he raised his head, water running down his jaw, their eyes met. The world seemed to stop. The creek's murmur faded to silence. He was perhaps 30, maybe older, his face roughened by years of hard living. A scar split one eyebrow and another curved along his jaw. His skin was tanned to leather, but his eyes, gray as winter storms, held something that made her breath catch. Sorrow, deep and endless. Neither moved, neither spoke. Clara knew she should turn and run, or call for help, but something in his stillness kept her there. He made no move toward his weapon, no threat, just calm, watchful silence. "I mean no harm, miss," he said at last. His voice was low and rough as gravel, "just watering my horse." Clara's voice came small but steady. "This is private land. The town's back that way." He stood slowly, careful, his hands visible. "I know. Figured I'd avoid the town. Some places don't take kindly to strangers. Most strangers use the road." A flicker of something, not quite a smile, touched his lips. Most strangers got nothing to hide. The words should have frightened her, but they didn't. She studied him instead, the holstered Colt at his side, worn but cared for, the straightness of his stance, the quiet strength in how he held himself. Not an outlaw, not exactly. A soldier, maybe. a man who'd seen too much. "You running from the law?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He met her gaze. "No, miss. The law and I got no quarrel. Just running from other things." She understood that. She, too, had been running. From Jacob Miller's constant proposals. From her mother's expectations. From the smallness of her life. "Clara!" Her mother's voice carried faintly on the wind from town. "Clara, where are you?" The moment broke. Clara grabbed her buckets, sloshing water over the rims. "I have to go." "Wait." He took a step forward, then stopped himself. "I'm sorry. Didn't mean to frighten you." "You didn't." She surprised herself by meaning it. "But you should move on. This town doesn't trust strangers, especially ones who avoid the road." He nodded, understanding flickering in those storm-gray eyes. "I'll be gone before moonrise." Quote, Clara shouldered her yoke and started back up the path. After a few steps, impulse made her glance over her shoulder. "There's a cavalry camp 2 days north," she called. "They sometimes hire scouts, men who know the land." He looked at her a long moment, then inclined his head. "Obliged." As Clara walked back toward town, her heart beat faster than the climb required. At the top of the rise, she looked back once more. He stood where she'd left him, a still silhouette against the copper sky, watching her go. That night, as she served stew to traveling merchants and listened to her father discussing her future with Jacob Miller, she found her thoughts drifting again to the creek, to the man with storm-gray eyes and a voice like gravel. Later, in her small room beneath the rafters, Clara pressed her palm to the cool window glass, staring into the vast, star-drenched dark. Somewhere out there, a stranger was riding away. Or perhaps not. She didn't know. But something in her life had shifted. Some quiet door inside her heart had opened, and a shadowed man with sad eyes had stepped through it. And though she didn't know his name, Clara Morgan would never forget the way he looked at her, as if, for one heartbeat in the fading light, he'd seen straight into her soul. Days passed in quiet rhythm. The town of Bitter Creek went on as it always had, dusty, stubborn, and half asleep beneath the western sun. Yet for Clara Morgan, everything felt changed. The memory of the stranger by the creek clung to her thoughts like the desert scent of sage after rain. She tried to push it away, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw those storm-gray eyes and the scar across his jaw. "Your head's been in the clouds all week." Her mother scolded one morning, finding her standing still at the wash basin, the breakfast dishes untouched. "Jacob Miller's coming to dinner Sunday. Your father invited him. You'll wear your blue dress, the one with the ivory buttons." Clara's stomach tightened. "Mama, I've told you, I don't feel that way about Jacob." Her mother gave a tired, bitter laugh. "Feelings don't keep a roof over your head, child. Jacob's the richest man in 3 counties. He'll give you comfort, protection, a fine house. Love comes later." Clara said nothing. She'd heard the same speech 100 times, but now the words scraped raw against her heart. Love comes later. What if it never came at all? What if she woke one day and found herself a stranger in her own life, just like her mother? That afternoon, the sound of hooves echoed down Main Street. Clara looked up from sweeping the porch and froze. A lone rider approached, the same bay gelding, the same quiet strength in the man's posture. But now he was changed, clean-shaven, wearing a proper hat and newer clothes. The same face, though, the same gray eyes that held a storm inside. He dismounted in front of the inn and removed his hat. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice familiar, rough, and steady. "I'm looking to rent a room. Few days, maybe a week." Clara's heart thudded, but she managed a calm tone. "Of course, sir. $2 a night, breakfast and supper included." Quote. He pulled out a worn wallet, counted the bills, and signed the register. "Samuel Cain," he said quietly. Clara liked the sound of it. Solid, biblical, a man with a past, and, maybe, a conscience. "You found work, then?" she asked softly. His eyes met hers, unreadable. "You remembered." Heat rose to her cheeks. "You seem like someone who might need the suggestion." "I did," he said after a pause. "Scout work for the cavalry. Temporary. They're surveying routes through Apache country. Needed men who can read sign, navigate hard land. And you can, Clara said, though she already knew. He nodded. I can. She handed him a brass key. Room 4, top of the stairs. Supper's at 6. Thank you, Miss Morgan. He took the key, their fingers brushing. The contact sent warmth up her arm like a spark. Clara. She whispered before she could stop herself. He inclined his head slightly. Clara. When he climbed the stairs, her father's voice boomed from behind the counter. New guest? Yes, Papa, Mr. Cain. He's a scout for the Army. Quote. Thomas Morgan squinted at the register. Cain, huh? Never heard of him. You keep your distance, girl. Drifters mean trouble, even ones working for the Army. Yes, Papa, Clara said softly. That evening, the dining room buzzed with travelers, salesmen, 2 officers, a land surveyor. In the corner sat Samuel Cain. He ate quietly, head slightly bowed, speaking only when addressed. Clara served him as she did the others, but her hands trembled when she set his plate down. More coffee, Mr. Cain? He looked up, his gray eyes softening. Thank you, Miss Morgan. Her name on his lips was its own kind of music. Across the room, Jacob Miller laughed, too loudly, his heavy boots propped on a chair, his eyes following Clara like a claim. When supper ended, he caught her arm near the door. You look lovely tonight, Clara, he said for all to hear. My future wife ought to. She pulled her arm free, forcing a polite smile. Good evening, Mr. Miller. Jacob's grin faltered at her tone. His eyes narrowed, hard and possessive. Samuel Cain's gaze flicked up from his corner, assessing, protective. Later, when the guests had gone, Clara stepped outside for air. The night smelled of dust and mesquite. She turned and froze. Samuel stood there, lighting a thin cigar, his face half-shadowed by the moon. Couldn't sleep? She asked. He looked at her a moment, then said, Old habits, hard to rest, easy under a roof. Walls feel too close. You were a soldier, she said quietly. He nodded once. Long time ago. They stood in silence, the distance between them thick with things unspoken. Jacob Miller, Samuel said finally, his voice low. He doesn't strike me as a man who takes no kindly. Clara gave a humorless smile. He doesn't, but my father owes him money, which means I owe him too, or so they both believe. Samuel's jaw tightened. You don't owe any man yourself. The words hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever said that to her before. She looked away, blinking fast. Good night, Mr. Cain. Good night, Miss Morgan. Over the next week, Bitter Creek buzzed with whispers. The drifter who kept to himself. The way the innkeeper's daughter smiled when she poured his coffee. The way Jacob Miller's temper grew shorter by the day. On Friday, Jacob arrived for dinner, dressed to impress, carrying flowers from the general store. You'll look fine in my new house, he declared at the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. 4 bedrooms, real glass windows from St. Louis. Clara smiled thinly, nodding at all the right times, but her gaze kept drifting to the corner table where Samuel ate in silence. When their eyes met, something inside her steadied, like a compass finding north. After supper, Jacob demanded she walk with him. Outside, beneath the weak glow of lanterns, he took her arm, his grip possessive. Your father says we'll wed come October, he said. Seems right to me. I haven't said yes, Clara whispered. Jacob's jaw tightened. Your father has. That's what matters. I'm not a parcel to be traded, Jacob. His voice hardened. You think you're too good for me, for this town? I've been patient, Clara. But you'll come around. Quote. When he leaned in to kiss her, she turned her face away. His hand caught her chin, forcing her back. Don't, she said sharply. For a long moment he stared at her, then laughed without humor. You'll change your mind soon enough. Inside, the door creaked open. Samuel Cain stood in the lobby's glow, eyes shadowed but sharp. He didn't speak, only watched as Jacob let her go and stalked off into the dark. You all right, Miss Morgan? He asked quietly. Clara nodded, though her voice shook. I will be. Samuel's gaze softened. That man means you harm. I'll stop him. You can't, she said. No one can, not here. He studied her, then gave a single nod. Then I'll be here anyway. And he was. Every night after that, sitting quietly in the courtyard beneath the stars, a silent guardian in the shadows. Clara told herself she shouldn't care, shouldn't notice. But every time she passed the window, her eyes searched for him, and every time she found him, something wild and unfamiliar stirred in her chest. It was foolish, dangerous, impossible. And yet, when the wind carried the sound of his voice from below, low and steady, humming some old soldier's tune, Clara Morgan felt, for the first time in her life, something close to peace. 3 days after the argument with Jacob Miller, Clara could no longer sleep. The town's gossip had turned cruel, her father's temper burned hotter by the hour, and word had spread that Cain would be leaving before the week's end. Bitter Creek had never felt so small. The walls of her life were closing in, and the only thought that made sense anymore was this. If she didn't do something tonight, she would lose her chance forever, so she did the unthinkable. When the clock struck midnight, Clara slipped out of the inn. The boards groaned under her feet, but the rest of the house slept heavy. She pulled her shawl tight and hurried through the dark streets, past shuttered shops and the faint glow of the saloon lantern. The road to the old cemetery stretched pale under the moonlight, bordered by twisted Joshua trees. Somewhere out there, Samuel was waiting, or perhaps she only hoped he would be. She found him sitting on a fallen log near the bend in the road, his hat low, a knife in hand as he carved a piece of wood by the dim light. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his features before softening into something else. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, already rising to his feet. "I had to come," she breathed. The moonlight fell across her face and he saw the faint bruise still shadowing her lip. His jaw clenched. "I should have killed him." "No," she said quickly, stepping close enough to smell the faint mix of leather, smoke, and dust on him. "That would have made things worse. You'd hang, and I'd still be trapped." He looked down at her, gray eyes full of hurt and admiration. "You're trapped now." "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't know how to breathe anymore." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Your father told me to leave. I got 2 days left before the sheriff comes calling." "That's why I'm here," Clara said. "I couldn't let you go without saying goodbye." Quote. They stood there in silence, the desert wind whispering around them. Finally, Samuel offered his arm, old-fashioned and gentle. "Walk with me?" Clara took it, and they moved together down the dusty trail. The stars burned bright above them, the only witnesses to a love that shouldn't have been, but somehow was. After a while, Samuel led her to a rocky ledge overlooking the sleeping town. "Pretty view," Clara murmured. "Is it?" His tone was quiet, bitter. "I see a cage. Every light down there is another lock on someone's soul." She sat beside him on the stone. "You don't like towns much." "No. Spent too many years fighting for them, burning them, rebuilding them. Hard to look at one and not see ghosts." "The war," she said softly. He nodded. "Pennsylvania infantry. 3 years wearing blue. I left parts of myself in every battle." He drew a breath that sounded heavier than the desert air. "Had a friend. James McKenna. We joined up together, farm boys thinking war would make men of us. He had a sweetheart waiting back home, wrote her every week. He died in my arms at Chancellorsville, calling her name. When I wrote to tell her, she sent a letter back saying she'd already married another man, said she couldn't wait forever." Clara's heart ached. "That's why you run," she said gently. "You're afraid to care again." He turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Most people don't see that clear." "Most people don't look," she said. "But I do." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert stretched wide and endless before them, the kind of silence that could swallow a life whole. "What I see in you scares me," Samuel said finally, voice low. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I don't deserve. You make me think about staying instead of running." Clara smiled sadly. "You think too much about what you deserve. What about what you want?" He swallowed hard, and his voice dropped to a whisper. Can I hold you?" The words trembled in the night air. Clara stepped closer, her heart pounding. "Yes," she said simply. He pulled her into his arms, careful at first, then, fiercely, as if afraid she might vanish. She rested her head against his chest, hearing the uneven rhythm of his heart. The strength of him, the roughness, the quiet tenderness beneath it all, it was everything she'd ever dreamed might exist and never dared hope to find. "I'm not a good man," he whispered into her hair. "I've done things, seen things that hollowed me out." "Then we'll fill the hollow spaces together," she said, "with better memories, with love." Samuel closed his eyes, breathing her in. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I know exactly what I'm asking for," Clara said. "When you leave, take me with you." He froze. "Clara!" "I mean it. I'd rather face the unknown with you than a lifetime of safety without you." His hands trembled against her back. "The life I lead? It's hard, dangerous, no comfort, no guarantees." "I don't want comfort," she said. "I want choice." Samuel's control broke then. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs tracing her cheeks. "You're braver than any soldier I've ever known." She smiled through her tears. "Then be brave with me." Quote, their lips met, soft and trembling, and the world fell away. The desert wind sighed through the mesquite. The stars burned bright and unblinking, and two lost souls found their way home in each other's arms. When they finally drew apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. 3 days, he said. "That's all I've got, before I have to ride out. If you truly mean this, meet me on the old mine road where it forks toward Miller's Canyon. Midnight. If you come, we ride together. If not, I'll understand." Clara nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I'll be there." He kissed her one last time, slow and reverent, as if memorizing her. Then he stepped back, his hand lingering on hers before letting go. "Go home, Clara," he whispered, "before someone sees." She turned and started down the path, her heart breaking and soaring all at once. When she looked back from the bend, he was still standing there, hat in hand, watching her with a tenderness that stole her breath. For the rest of that night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every glance, every touch. Outside, the wind carried the faint cry of a coyote and the whisper of something she now understood deep in her bones. Love was worth any risk, and when dawn finally broke over Bitter Creek, painting the world in gold and promise, Clara Morgan knew her choice was made. In 3 days, when the moon rose high and the desert wind called her name, she would follow the man who had once whispered the simplest, most powerful words she'd ever heard. "Can I hold you?"